Hello, everyone. Say what now? There are now multiple sources covering a statement from Donald Trump basically saying that um, it's Europe's fault that the war in Ukraine is still going on. I'm sorry, is it Europe that's firing at Ukraine? Is it Europe trying to take over Ukrainian territory? Is it Europe murdering Ukrainian civilians, including children? Right, but it's their fault. Of course, the ridiculous part is that there's a constant you can't have it both ways issue with this administration's approach to the war in Ukraine. On one hand, there was the campaign promise of ending the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. As we know, it didn't happen, or in 100 days, or in 50 days, or in 2 weeks, or whatever else might be put out there. Second, there was the accusation that Europe is not pulling its weight. That is not true. Europe has not only provided more aid to Ukraine than the United States, and you are free to fact check me on this, but also Europe had imposed twice as many sanctions against Russia compared to the United States. And Europe, with the exception of certain members such as Hungary, Slovakia, Bosnia, has not been cozying up to Trump, and when those did, it basically was demonstrated to them that they are kind of alone in that. Now, is it sad that there is no protocol for getting kicked out of the European Union or out of NATO for that kind of behavior? Yes. It's infuriating as fuck. But it is what it is. So, accusing Europe of something, at this point, from the US standpoint, it's a little bit more than a little bit absurd. Now, is Europe perfect? No. And unfortunately, not enough European leaders have been to Ukraine, although several of them have been, but not enough have been there to fully understand what's going on there. So one of the proposals was to establish a buffer zone for Ukraine to end the war. How is that going to help? The problem is that what they're proposing is that the buffer zone on Ukrainian territory. Why? Again, how is that a sacrifice to Russia? What is Russia going to be conceding in that particular case? Second, this is where I agree with Zelensky, and he has become pretty well heeled in the technological state of today's warfare. People who are suggesting this do not understand how this war has been going on. Because of the extensive use of the drone technology, what Zelensky had pointed out is that a kind of buffer zone already exists. Basically, it's an area where there is no heavy artillery and no troops to speak of because of the fear of the drone strikes. So that is already on each side of the zone because both countries have drones. What he pointed out is that the heavy weapons are located at a distance of more than 10 kilometers from one another. So that's there, and it has not ended the war. It exists of necessity. If we want to talk about a buffer zone, first of all, it needs to be on Russia's territory and not Ukraine's. Because again, Russia has committed a war crime. It had violated numerous articles of the UN Charter, and it should not be in the UN or in the Security Council. So, the punishment should be not just clearing Russia out of Ukraine, but Russia having to sacrifice its territory to create a buffer zone between it and anybody else who is sick and tired of having Russia as a neighbor. So we're not just talking Ukraine. If Belarus insists on being Russia's, court jester, fine. Then Belarus gets isolated too. So we're talking about Russia's border with Ukraine, Ukraine's border with Belarus, the border between Belarus and EU, and between Belarus and the Baltic states, and between the Baltic states and Russia, and between Finland and Russia. And that's just in Europe. There will have to be a revision of what's going on in the south along Russia's southern border and what's going on over on the other end, because we already said Russia has a very tense relationship with Japan. And the fact that both China and North Korea have been cozying up to Russia is not making either Japan or South Korea very happy. So all of that has to be taken into consideration when we start talking about things like demilitarized zone or buffer zone. Why should Russia be punished here? Again, for all of that talk about peace and all of that, Russia continues pounding Ukrainian civilians. And I said this many times, and I will continue saying this, because those civilians include my parents and other friends and family. Had it just been between the two armies, okay-ish. But this is not. It's still not okay to attack another country and require an extensive army involvement on its part. But it's particularly not okay to continue pounding civilians. So this is an expansion. We had this horrific attack on Ukraine's capital, Kyiv. This is an attack on 14 of Ukraine's region, including my native region of Zaporizhia, where one woman was killed and 30 people were injured, including children. This attack included nearly 540 drones and 45 missiles. And again, in an eminent fit of cynicism, Russia said that all targets of the strike have been achieved. Let that sink in. What targets? Residential building? What targets? Show me, where were military targets among whatever Russia has hit? A railway? What other targets? And yes, Ukraine continues hitting Russia's oil refineries, which, as I mentioned before, are military objects. The moment Russia stops using its oil to attack Ukraine, to feed the army, that will stop. All they need to do is stop. And yes, Russia has no regard for words. None whatsoever. Explain to me, how are two boys, aged 9 and 10, and a 16-year-old girl part of Russia's targets in Zaporizhia that they plan to achieve? How many times do people who understand what's going on, like Kaja Kallas, have to say Russia is not interested in peace? Show me how an apartment building in Zaporizhia is a military target. More to come.